Hey guys, this is Phil Nelson, and you are listening to my brand new podcast, Capital Creation Project, a show that talks about the up and down journey to find financial freedom through entrepreneurship. I decided a long time ago that I was going to choose the life of risk in hopes of gaining the reward, and it has been a journey of both good and bad. I'm nowhere near the end goal, but I've learned that this is all a part of the ride. At 18 years old, my dad sat me down and asked me, "Son, what do you want to do with your life?" Not having any idea what I wanted to do with my life, I started to describe what I wanted my life to look like. He said, "Sounds like you need to make a lot of money." Soon after that conversation is when I started my internship at a commercial real estate firm. And that's when I fell in love with real estate and knew that real estate would be a part of my life forever. I've worked the buy and sell side of commercial brokerage, as well as selling debt and equity. I took a break to work in tech recruiting, where I grew my network and I learned a lot about businesses. After my hiatus in tech recruiting, I dove back into real estate and have been doing it ever since. I've helped countless clients through transactions of all kinds over the years, but my favorite is helping people explore the power of leverage and how that plays a significant hand in the long game of setting yourself up for success. I am on the road of taking risks to set myself up for financial freedom and hopefully a business to leave my family to run if they choose to do so. I'm taking the last 12 years of working and taking risks in hope to encourage and inspire you to either continue the journey or to start it. Risk-taking can look different for everyone, but I've found that the more risks you take, both big and small, it becomes easier and easier over time. On today's show, I've got my good buddy, Matt Hart, with me talking about the importance of taking risks. If anyone can talk about risk-taking, it's Matt. Matt is a dad of 4. He's been in real estate for 20 years, and he recently opened his own firm, First and Main, of which I'm a part of here in Snohomish, Washington. He's going to start by sharing some stories about taking risk and how it's got him to where he is today. So welcome to the show, Matt.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Yeah, I'm honored to be here.
Absolutely. Happy New Year.
Yeah.
2024.
For sure.
Crazy. We made it through. How was the Christmas?
Christmas was great. Yeah. Spent some time with the family, getting this new brokerage up and running. We had some holiday events with our new crew, which was super exciting. And yeah, it's been great.
Nice.
How about yours?
It was good. We stayed local. Nothing too crazy. Was shared between both families, both Liz's side and my side. So that was, it's always running back and forth doing. Like
always.
Everyone wants to see the kids, and so you're kind of your time is always split. But it was a good time. It was relaxing. It was a lot of fun.
A little bit of guilt there.
Always. Yeah.
Yep.
So, but it's been good. I'm excited about the new year. Starting it off. But let's dive right in here.
Sure.
Before we start really drilling deep, maybe give the audience just a little bit of a backstory of you and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm local. So I'm born and raised here in Snohomish County, and a family of entrepreneurs. My dad owned an auto repair business and built that literally with his bare hands from the time I was born. And so we didn't have a whole lot when I was a kid. As I got older and got into high school, his business kind of started to evolve and take off. And so we got to see some of the fruits of that labor. But being born into an entrepreneurial family is in my blood, and that's kind of how me and my brothers have always thought and were raised. So, what got me into the real estate game was my parents had flipped a couple houses when I was growing up, and so I remember spending summers laying on the floor or playing on the floor of vacant homes while my parents are painting, and they're doing all the work themselves.
Yeah.
They're not hiring it out, so just trying to figure that piece out and riding my bike around neighborhoods where I didn't know any kids and stuff like that. So I had that in the back of my head, and I always knew that there was opportunity there.
Totally.
And so then once once I graduated high school and I went to college, I realized I wanted to be a high school basketball coach, but I didn't want to be a high school teacher. So, and so I thought, well, let's explore this. Let's explore this real estate game. I've got a little bit of history with that as a kid. So I went and got my real estate license, and I went to an office in the town that I grew up in, Marysville, and the reader board out front said hiring brokers. And so I walked in, I was 21 years old and I had long hair, and I was, and I walk in, I talked to the designated broker, and he says, we're not hiring. And I think he was looking at me as some punk kid, and he was not wanting to take risk. So that did nothing but fuel my fire. So I drove down the road to, I think it was even the next real estate office I saw, and I walked in there. I cold called them basically. I walked in the door and I said, hey, I want to hang my license somewhere, and a gentleman by the name of Bob Barrett took a risk on me, and kind of the rest is history. So,
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't think I knew that story, to be honest.
And I can picture that guy in my head who told me that he wasn't going to hire me. So that's maybe I should let that go.
Derive motivation from a myriad of places, but
for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And
really
so
cool.
20 years later, and here I am. Yep.
Yeah. Wow. Talk a little bit about if we kind of look big picture here, the real estate market is probably the worst it's been since the GFC, right? Since the great financial crisis in 08 through 12. Interest rates are through the roof. Transaction volume is down. What for you kind of pushed you and said, you know what, now's the time. I'm going to start my own brokerage.
Yeah.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say, here we go, world. Let's take it on.
Yeah, I've been asked that question a number of times, obviously, because who would do something like that, right? So I look at it through a little bit different lens. I survived the 2008 through 2012. And that was a pretty rough time, but I learned a lot going through that process. And I knew, seeing what was on the horizon back in 22, that when they were going to start raising interest rates and all of this stuff was coming down the pipe, I knew that I was probably not going to be transacting as much real estate as I typically would. So I knew that there was an opportunity for time. And I also knew that brokers were going to be looking for answers. So I thought, this was a perfect opportunity for me to jump in and jump into something that I had been thinking about and exploring, and an idea that I had in my head. There were some other personal things that happened in my world where the stars just kind of aligned, and I thought, this is an opportunity for me to do this. And so 23 to me was a year of really setting a foundation. I didn't have any expectations of we were going to blow this thing away in 23, because that's just not what the market was. But what it did was it gave me an opportunity to grow and create that foundation so that we were ready moving forward when that pendulum swung back the other way.
Yeah, you've been talking to me about starting a firm, starting a brokerage. Shortly, I won't say is like in the first meeting, because a little bit of context, a little bit of background. Matt and I have worked together for the last 4 years at 3 different brokerages. Matt recruited me to the first brokerage that I was at Marketplace Sotheby's. So not in that recruiting meeting did you bring up starting your own brokerage, but shortly after, right? Like that was kind of on your heart to hey, I think one day that's probably the route I'm going to go.
Yeah.
And obviously, you can't time the market perfectly. You're never going to be able to. The only time that whether it was the right timing or not is in the rearview mirror.
Sure,
right?
For sure. Yep.
So for you, even though you were jumping into a relatively kind of dicey time frame, you had that conviction, and it's been kind of with you for a while.
Yeah, for sure.
Does that come from your dad, your parents, kind of that entrepreneur? Like, is it just like I knew I always wanted to build something for myself, or
right?
How did that kind of?
Yeah, absolutely. So. Yeah, it had been something that I had explored for a number of years, and just kind of looking for an opportunity to jump in. When I was a kid, I'll kind of rabbit trail here for a second. My dad really instilled in us, hearts are winners, all of that kind of stuff, that rah stuff,
that.
and I love it. But as a kid, it honestly paralyzed me a little bit because what it did is it kept me from wanting to fail. And what I mean by that is I couldn't be great at it, then I didn't want to do it.
Wow.
Right. And so as a kid, I couldn't connect those dots. But but later in life, as I kind of started to dive into podcasts and different things, I started really immersing myself in people like Tony Robbins or even like Will Smith. I spent a lot of time studying him.
Is this pre punching Chris Rock or post punching?
That was pre.
Okay.
Yeah. Exactly.
Want to make sure what studying you're doing.
Exactly. So, I kind of dove into those things and it really immersed myself in that. And really what I pulled away from that was the ability to kind of connect the dots and how I was raised and understanding failure and how to use it as a tool.
Yep.
Instead of shying away from it, understanding how to use that in your life and take on opportunity, right?
No doubt.
I think that it's that mindset shift that really kind of, the skies open up and, all of a sudden the world is your oyster, right? And then you're only limited by the creativity of your imagination, right?
Yeah.
So I think it was really doing that, taking that step, connecting the dots, and then, timing the market, I think.
Yep.
Again, people may think that I jumped in at the wrong time, but I think it was the perfect time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Tell me about a time in your life in which you took a risk, you jumped out, and maybe it didn't play out the way that you thought it would. Sure. And what did you do to either pick yourself back up off the mat or, keep going? What was kind of your thought process?
Well, I can give you an example. A lot of times real estate brokers will flip houses, right?
Yeah.
We see a lot of stuff that maybe the public doesn't see as far as inventory goes and opportunities, things like that. So I flipped a house once. It was the first time that I had flipped a house alone, no partners. I'm going into this all by myself and I ran the numbers and everything looked great. And we get into it and I had a contractor, he tore the roof off of the house, and put tarps over it and they were going to re-roof it the next day. Well, there was a windstorm that night and the tarps blew off of the house and it rained inside the house. So on day one, 24 hours I've owned this property and it is flooded. It was a nightmare.
Oh no.
And I'm sure a lot of real estate investors will have nightmare stories on flips and things like that. But I could tell you, man, I was freaking out. I was scared. All my money was into this.
How old were you at this time?
Early 30s.
Okay.
Yeah, early 30s. So I'd been in the real estate game for a while at that point.
Yeah.
And I had flipped other properties and I had done, I had some investment properties and stuff like that, but I felt like I was really taking a risk here.
Yeah.
Alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was a nightmare for me.
Yeah.
And, I filed an insurance claim, which haunted me for years, by the way. But yeah,
insurance the worst.
It's the worst. But yes, I ended up. I didn't lose on that one though. I ended up making like a couple $1,000s after it was all said and done. Yeah. So I didn't take a fat L on it, but it was. I lived to die another day. But man, it was brutal, and so that scarred me for a little bit. Yeah. And so I didn't flip another house for a while just because putting that much risk out there and did not make much reward and go through that hell was tough.
Oh gosh. That's funny. All right. I've got a question. I get this question a lot. But I'm curious your thoughts. A little bit of a pivot here. Mm-hmm. In your opinion, which is a riskier career path? Being a 1099 employee or being a W-2 employee?
That's a great question. So I would say they say the safe bet is the clock in, clock out.
Sure,
Go
totally.
go to college.
Yeah.
Get a good job and all of that. I genuinely don't think that that's how humans are wired. I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think that in order to feel fulfilled, I think people need to grow and create and live with some risk, because that's what fuels that fire, right?
Yeah.
That's what makes that builds, right? And so a lot of people will jump into that 9 to 5, and I have a lot of buddies that are in that same boat, and they're making good money and all of that, but they feel very unfulfilled. And I have conversations with them about this, and they feel kind of lost, right? They're doing great financially and their families are fine, but they just have this emptiness. And I don't know if that emptiness can be filled. And some W-2s maybe,
Sure,
maybe they do that.
Yeah.
Maybe not all of them. But
Yeah.
I think for the most part, if you're generally speaking, I think you got to be able to take some risk, in order to grow as a person, not just financially,
Yeah.
right? But as a human. So
yeah, my response to that is, I personally think that the W-2 is a more risky play.
okay,
And really the reason behind that is you don't control your destiny. You don't control your time. You don't control your paycheck. Like, that's all controlled by somebody else. Now, to a degree, we don't. We obviously need the participation of somebody else to elect into the services that we are offering or providing. And so for that, there is risk involved. At the same time, my ability to earn and create is all predicated on what I do, my output. There isn't, at the end of the year, there isn't, oh shoot, because the company didn't perform the way that we thought it would, we're going to have to slash bonuses, or we're not going to, be able to keep you around. We're going to have to lay off, right? Like that doesn't happen in our space.
Right.
And so if you have kind of that mold of wanting to better yourself and, bootstrap and get it going, like, to me, the far less risky play is actually going out on your own and making a name for yourself, not enlisting the services of somebody else to ensure that your paycheck shows up on Friday afternoon.
Yeah, for sure. But it takes courage, right? It takes a lot to take that step.
Yeah.
I agree with you, but what I found is that taking that step, that entrepreneurial step, taking that risk, right?
Yeah.
That's what holds people back.
Yeah.
And it's too bad. Hopefully this podcast can help people, be willing to take that risk.
Man, we were running up a little bit on time here. I've got so much more that I want to get to, and we can probably break into some of that maybe a little bit later. But I wanted to thank you for coming on this episode. I know you'll be back because you're a wealth of information.
Thanks.
So thank you for enriching the audience today. Thank you for believing in me, taking risk and hiring and bringing me into the firm.
So that one's a no-brainer.
That's a silly comment. We're gonna have to evaluate that a little bit more. But yeah, grateful for your friendship and your mentorship in my life, and I can't wait for you to be back on and
appreciate it, man.
and talk more.
Happy to be here, man. Thanks.
Awesome.
Thanks for letting me be a part of it.
Sweet. Thanks, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next episode of Capital Creation Project.